Hello! So today I wanted to go through a bunch of the books I read in 2023 and pick out which ones I think are the best. So my name's McKenna. I currently work at a library, and because I work at a library, I read more books than I have ever read before. I read, I think, 133 or 34 books this year, which is absolutely ridiculous. It blows my mind because I have never read that much. That's like, it's so many books. Yeah, but as I've read that many, I have figured out what I like a little better, and there are a bunch of different categories I'm going to present to you today with all the different books that I have loved this year. So since this will be kind of a long video, let's go ahead and get started. So the first category is just graphic novels because I read a lot of them at work this year. The first one being Bug Boys by Laura Knetzger, which is an adorable little graphic novel with these two bug boys who are friends and they just go on adventures, and it's just all about friendship, and it's so cute. I love it a lot. Just absolutely adorable. And then we have On a Sunbeam by Tillie Walden, which is a beautiful graphic novel. Like, these illustrations I want hung on my wall. They're so gorgeous. But it takes place in space with these kids who, this one kid joins like a group of people who are fixing buildings in space. And overall it's just like about this kid finding family and finding love. It's gay, it's in space, it's about loneliness and friendship again, and it's wonderful, and I love it so much. I read a bunch of Tillie Walden this year, but this one is the best of what I read, I think. Okay. And then we have The Tea Dragon Society by Kay O'Neill, which is another kids graphic novel, which features these little tea dragons who grow tea leaves on their backs, and when you drink the tea leaves, it gives you memories from the time you've spent with that tea dragon, and it's really wholesome and sweet, and the art is beautiful. I love it a lot. And then I also read Birds of Maine by Michael DeForge, which is a weird and kind of surreal graphic novel about all of the birds from Earth have moved to the moon and created their own society there. They have fungal internet, and it's just all about these birds and the society they built. It's funny and it's strange, and I loved it a lot. Okay, so of the books in this category, I think my favorite, it's really hard for me to decide because I like all of them, but I think I have to go with On a Sunbeam by Tillie Walden, because it's just so beautiful and immersive, and the story is captivating, and the pictures are captivating. Everything about it is just beautiful and wonderful, and I love Tillie Walden. Yeah, okay, so our next category is YA. I specifically work with teens at the library, so I've been trying to read a lot of YA, just so I can have more recommendations. And I've read some bad ones, but I have also read some good ones. So the first one in our list is A Lesbiana's Guide to Catholic School by Sonora Reyes. So I read a lot of like coming out stories in the YA books this year, and honestly most of them just got on my nerves. But this one was actually a very good coming out story. So we have our main character who is not only gay but also Hispanic, and she is just dealing with all of the things that come with that, and she's trying to come out to her family. Yeah, it's just written really well. It's compelling. It's got complex characters. It's well written, yeah. And then next on our list, we have Lobizona by Romina Garber. And this is a fantasy novel about a girl who is a werewolf. So it actually takes place mostly in the Everglades in Florida, which is really cool. And I love that it has like basically a magic school in the Everglades for the werewolves and the witches in this story. And I've got to say, if I had read this in high school, I would have been obsessed with it. Like, it has everything I love, including the fantasy, the woodlands, like magical woods, magical school, witches, all of that. I love it so much. And it just was excellent. And I also read the sequel, did not love the sequel as much, but the first one is very good. Next up, we have Seasparrow by Kristin Cashore. Kristin Cashore. And this is the 5th book in the Graceling Realm series. So you might be familiar with it from back when you were a kid, maybe. But Kristin Cashore actually recently started writing new novels to this series, and they are really good. Whereas the first 3 from back in the 2000s were entertaining, these are like actually genuinely good. Seasparrow follows one of the characters from the realm who is on a boat and trying to travel back to the mainland where she's from, but the boat crashes and they end up going on this winter adventure trying to get back to society and survive. So there's a lot of boats and a lot of winter, and I love all of that. But it's also obvious that Kristin did a lot of research into boats, because there's just so much detail in it, and I love it. And not only that, but there's a lot of like deep characterization and good relationships, and also the blue telepathic foxes, they're great. So that's an excellent book. And then last but not least, we have The Girl from the Sea by Molly Knox Ostertag. And this one is a graphic novel, but I put it in this category because it's just a great YA. We have, the plot of this is basically that a girl falls in love with a Selkie, who is, if you don't know the myth of the Selkies, they are creatures who turn into seals. They're seal people. They can like shed their seal skin. So it's gay, it's got myths, it's everything I love. And the art is very cute, and it's just really sweet. Just wholesome, and I love it. So, the winner from this category has got to go to Lobizona, purely because I know I would have loved it so much as a teenager, and I think it's extremely well done. It's got so many different plot elements that I would love. It's like uses Argentinian folklore in like the myth of the werewolves and the witches. So it actually incorporates like culturally relevant folk tales, which I love seeing in my books, as you can see with the Selkies and everything, but it's just excellent. I love it. I love it. Job well done to Lobizona. Okay, this next category is nonfiction. I always like reading nonfiction to learn more about everything. We have a few winners here. The first in this category is I'm Glad My Mom Died by Jennette McCurdy, which I'm sure you've heard about. Lots of people have been reading it this year, and it's worth the hype. It is so good. So this is Jennette McCurdy's memoir about her time as a child star and her experience with her mother abusing her and pushing her into this career that she didn't want. It's very dark, and there's a lot of hurt in this book, but somehow Jennette McCurdy manages to write it in such a way that it feels more lighthearted because there's like a resolution in that we know Jennette McCurdy has made it this far and that she is doing better than she was as a kid. So it's just so well written, and it'll make you cry, it'll make you laugh. Like, she did such a good job writing it. Next up we have Ithell Colquhoun, Genius of the Fern-Loved Gully by Amy Hale. This is a biography of Ithell Colquhoun, who was a surrealist occultist artist. She was very much involved in the surrealist movement, but she also like separated herself from the surrealist movement by being into various different things. She was really into like Celtic mythology, but also into the occult. So she practiced a lot of like witchcraft and was very much involved in the area of the occult, and her paintings are often depicting like sex magic or other things related to the occult, so they're not strictly in the surrealist category. This book was just fascinating. I loved learning about Ithell Colquhoun and all about that whole category of art. It's fascinating. Okay, next up we have The Ethical Slut by Jennette W. Hardy and Dossie Easton. And this is specifically the 3rd edition, which is updated and expanded. So this is an exploration of how to practice polyamory in an ethical way. And it's kind of like a guidebook, but it also reflects the experiences of the authors. And while I think it's helpful as a guide for polyamory, I also think it's helpful for anyone in any sort of romantic or sexual relationship, because it just tells you how to have a good relationship. It highlights the importance of communication and like openness, being open to each other, and I loved this book. If you read it though, I would recommend the updated version, because I think the original version is from the 70s maybe, and I tried to read that one and it like had some problems, so they really did a good job updating it for the modern era. Okay. Next up we have Laziness Does Not Exist by Devon Price. And this is a book all about how, basically how capitalism does not allow us to rest, even though we have a right to rest as humans. It's about how, I mean, as the title says, laziness is not an actual thing. It's something we have made up to make ourselves feel terrible and to make ourselves try to work more, even though that's not necessarily healthy. We need to be lazy, we need to rest in order to be human. And I personally think this book goes hand in hand with Rest Is Not Resistance? Rest as Resistance? Let me check. Rest is Resistance by Tricia Hersey. It's which is another book I read this year. They go hand in hand, and if you read one, I think you should also read the other, because they really like converse with each other essentially. Yeah, I highly recommend both of those. But Laziness was the first book I read in 2023, and it was great. It stuck with me throughout the year. So the winner of this category, again, it's really hard for me to pick one here, but I think I'm gonna go with Ithell Colquhoun, just because I learned about this new world of art, and I like reinvigorated an interest of mine. I have become re-obsessed with the occult and occultist art specifically, so I'm very thankful I found this book, and I can't wait to read more. I keep trying to look up more about Ithell Colquhoun, and I think Amy Hale actually has a new book coming out soon, so I'm gonna be looking into that when it does come out. Our next category is climate fiction. So I've read a lot of books this year that center around the theme of climate change, and I've enjoyed all of them, honestly. So I have 4 books in this category too. So the first one is The Word for World is Forest by Ursula K. Le Guin. So this is a book about humans deforesting an alien planet and the indigenous aliens getting revenge on the humans for doing that. And I don't think I even need to say anymore. It's great. Recommend it. Next up we have Born by Jeff Vandermeer, and this is a weird book. You know, Jeff is known for his new weird genre. It's weird, it's dystopian, it takes place in a futuristic world where the company has created these like technological life forms that are really mutated and disturbing, and it's just about these people trying to survive in this world, but they find this creature named Born, and it's just about Born growing and evolving and how the people navigate their relationship with Born. I can't say too much because it will spoil the plot, but it was great. Yeah, I recommend that one. Next up we have The Octopus Museum by Brenda Shaughnessy. I hope I'm saying that right. This is a volume of poetry, so it's all poems, but they're fictional poems in that they take place in this world where the octopi have taken over and become the dominant life form. Yeah, I don't know, again, I can't really say much about it, you just have to read it and experience it, but I absolutely loved this exploration of a future world in poetry. It was great. Next up we have The Monk and Robot Duology by Becky Chambers, starting with A Psalm in the Wild Build. A Psalm for the Wild Build. And you may have heard of this duology. It's a novella duology that take place on an alien world in the distant future where robots have become sentient and separated themselves from humans so that they can go into the wild and explore nature and just live their lives on their own. It centers around this tea-monk who meets one of these robots, and he's the first... It centers around a tea-monk who meets one of these robots, and they are the first person to contact the robots in ages. And these two form a friendship, and it's just a very heartwarming, cozy, comforting book about humanity and friendship. It's wonderful. So, the winner of this category is Born by Jeff Vandermeer, and specifically Born plus its companion novella, which is called The Strange Bird. It's only a few pages long, and this whole like series of books is just, it's excellent. It's weird. It makes me think. I don't know, I like end up piecing apart this book, like trying to figure out what it means and like if this piece of the book is related to this other piece and what it is trying to say about the larger world. I just really appreciate the weirdness of it, honestly. I love the weird things. So, gotta give it to Born. Next up we have short story collections. The first book on this list is Florida by Lauren Groff, which is a collection of stories that take place in north central Florida, mostly. They have this beautiful imagery about the like rotting, beautiful landscape of Florida, and the writing in this is like very beautiful. It's descriptive and just, I highly recommend it. It does, yeah. Yeah, highly recommend. Next up, we have The Bloody Chamber and Other Stories by Angela Carter. This is a gothic fairy tale retelling, a collection of different fairy tale stories. It's dark and creepy and slightly strange, and I love that about it. And then, last but not least, we have Swarm Tree of Honeybees, Honeymoons, and the Tree of Life by Doug Elliott. Doug Elliott is a, kind of infamous storyteller from Appalachia, and I got to meet him and go on, a plant walk with him where he did a tour of the native plants. So this is his, one of his collections of stories about nature throughout Appalachia that he's experienced. It was funny and enlightening and just very sweet. So it was really good. And okay, the winner of this category is Florida by Lauren Groff. I just fell in love with Lauren's writing. I have never felt so understood by a piece of writing before, but just something about the way she thinks seems to be similar to how my brain functions. It's really hard to explain, but there's a certain melancholy within the words that I relate to. But like I said, it also has beautiful writing about the nature of Florida. So yeah, I highly recommend these stories. They're great. They also have themes of motherhood, if you're interested in that. Okay. The next category is everything cozy and comforting, because I have been loving those books this year. As much as I also love dark and strange books, I also love cozy and comforting books. So the first up is once again the Monk and Robot duology. It is so cozy and so comforting and heartwarming. You've got tea, you've got friends, you've got questions about life and philosophy. It's great. Gotta love it. And then, let's see. Next up, once again, we have Bug Boys by Laura Knetzger, because it's just too cute. I love it. I think it's been described as similar to Adventure Time, and I would agree with that. It's just very cute and sweet. Next up, we have The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet by Becky Chambers. Yes, she is showing up again. So this is from a series before Monk and Robot duology, but it is set in space on a spaceship. It reminds me so much of Firefly, the show, and that's really what I love about it, but it's also so cozy and comforting. It's like found family, friendships, these people just having an adventure in space, but they all love each other, and it's really wonderful. I love it so much. And then, last but not least, I don't think most people would count this as a cozy or comforting book, but I do. It's Spinning Silver by Naomi Novik. So this is sort of a Rumpelstiltskin retelling, but it's like set in the winter, and I find it cozy because it's set in the winter, I think, which may be strange, I don't know. But I really love Naomi Novik's writing. It's compelling, she's got complex characters, the descriptions of nature and also just of the world that they occupy is great, and I just loved every minute of this. It was so good. Yeah, so I found that quite comforting, personally. So the winner of this category is definitely the Monk and Robot duology. I just love them. I love them as much as other people love them. They are the ultimate comfort read. Next category is for Best Cover. First up, we have Dead Astronauts by Jeff Vandermeer. And this is actually the third book in the Born series, if you count the novella. And, I mean, it's just stunning. What a good cover. I know people personally who have picked up this book because of the cover, not knowing that it was in a series. It's amazing. However, I will say, do not necessarily love this book. I mean, it was good. It just was very confusing and even stranger than Born. Yeah, not my favorite, but has a banging cover. And then next up we have Lobizona, once again by Romina Garber. I mean, it's a beautiful cover. It has these lovely illustrations on it. I love all of the detail and the nature and the colors, the moon. It's great. Love it. So the winner in this category has to be Die the Astronauts because it's just such a compelling cover. I love it. So the next category is nature descriptions, because I love me a good book with nature descriptions. And the first book in this category is The Vaster Wilds by Lauren Groff. Yes, she's here again. So I actually got to meet Lauren. She lives in my town, and she did her book launch for this book in my town, and she signed this for me. It was great. I got to tell her how much Florida meant to me. And then I read this almost immediately, and I was like gasping at work. It's the plot is just that this girl runs away from the family that she works for. She's a servant from a colonial settlement, and it's just her journey through the woods. She's trying to survive in the wilderness, and so there are a lot of descriptions of her surviving in the woods, nature. Yeah, it's great. Next up, Florida by Lauren Groff, once again. Yeah, she's just great at describing nature, and this is specifically the Florida nature. The first story in this, actually, it doesn't say it outright, but I could tell from the writing of it that the first story takes place in the specific neighborhood that I used to live in town, which was wild to me. So it's like about this woman going on a walk through her neighborhood, and I'm like, I used to do that. Yeah, so it's great. Love it. Next up, we have The Left Hand of Darkness by Ursula K. Le Guin. So this is another sci-fi on a planet where we have basically an ambassador from one planet traveling to this icy world and trying to convince the natives of something, like an alliance with them or something like that. But the thing I loved about this book was the nature writing, because it's on this like ice planet, and at one point we have this whole journey with two men just traveling through this like barren wasteland with blizzards and like on top of a glacier and all of this stuff, and I just loved the writing. I guess another theme in my favorites this year has been like winter writing. Interestingly, I'm not sure why exactly, but yeah, just excellent. And then last but not least, we have Swarm Tree by Doug Elliott, once again, because it's all about the nature writing and his funny stories of things he's experienced. But I think the winner of this category has to be The Vaster Wilds, just because of the impact it had on me while I was reading it, but also it's all about the nature. Like we have, here's one quote that says, "She listened over the scrape and bow of the wind, cold trunk rubbing trunk in a tuning of fiddles, but she heard no footsteps and no breaking twigs." Like just page after page of excellent nature descriptions. It's wonderful. Okay, next category are books that made me have an existential crisis, because it happens a lot. And the first book in this category is Babel by R.F. Kuang. This is another one that lots of people have been ogling over this year. And I mean, the title appealed to me, so I started listening to the audiobook, and then I loved it so much that halfway through the book I went and bought this physical copy. Yeah, it's great. It's about a magic system that is based on linguistics, and it's also a critique of capitalism. So it's great. Next up we have 1984 by George Orwell. It's my first time reading it, and I am so glad I read it because now I see references to this book everywhere. But I loved it. It was a little too irrelevant, you know? It's eerie and it has great descriptions, and again there's like a lot of talk about language in it, similar to Babel. Don't know how you're supposed to pronounce that, but yeah, I really enjoyed 1984. If you don't know the premise, it's basically a dystopian world. Oh, apparently it's a negative utopia. Interesting. But there's just eternal warfare, and the government is keeping the citizens blind to everything that's going on, and like forcing them to not have any knowledge or insight. It's just this bleak life where you work and you actually work to erase truth and knowledge. It's kind of terrifying. Okay, next up we have Prophet Song by Paul Lynch, which was the winner of the Booker Prize this year. I read it because it was like before I knew it won, because a lot of people had been recommending it and it sounded really intriguing. So it's a book about a totalitarian Ireland, like it's falling, but it's as it's falling into this totalitarian world. So it's kind of like we're starting in our current modern world, but you slowly see this fall, this decline of the country as people are arrested for protesting and like just disappear. You never hear from them again, and there's warfare happening all over the country, and the writing in this is really interesting because it has almost no formatting. There are no quotations, there are no paragraphs, so it feels like one very long fever dream. It's pretty interesting how they did it, so I recommend that one. And then, last but not least, we have Pew by Catherine Lacey. This is one I had heard recommended a lot, so I picked it up and I also loved it. So it's about this genderless figure who shows up one day in this small town. They show up in a church, so the town names this person Pew, but nobody can figure out what this person's gender is. Nobody can, and Pew themselves cannot remember anything about their life, so it's about this town kind of just absolutely going nuts, trying to figure out who this person is and where they belong. And there's kind of an eerie speculative element to this, as there's some large festival or festivity about to happen in this town, but nobody really explains what it is. So you're building up to this unknown event, and like you gotta figure out what's gonna happen, and it's all just very eerie and mysterious and strange. I love that about it. But I gotta say, the winner of this category has to be Babel, just because of how much of an impact it had on me. So I actually read this as I was in the process of quitting grad school. So this is entirely an instance of right book, right time, because this book is a huge criticism of academia. The character in it, the main character, is about to go to this prestigious school for magic. And it's all about him and his friends, like, trying to bring down the academic establishment, basically. So I just had a great time with it, and it, like, validified my feelings. It validated my feelings about grad school and academia, so I loved it. Highly recommend. Okay, the last category we have here are best book overall. The first one on this list is Contact by Carl Sagan, which this is a reread for me this year. I hadn't read it since high school, but Contact is what made me want to go into astronomy, which I was in grad school for astronomy and then I quit. So Contact had a huge impact on me and on my life and the trajectory of my life. So I decided to pick it up after I quit grad school this year, and I loved it just as much as I loved it back then. If you're not familiar, there's also a movie, which this is the movie cover. It has Jodie Foster and Matthew McConaughey, and it's a really good movie. I highly recommend that too. But it's about this astronomer who discovers a message from an alien civilization, and it turns out this message is instructions for building some sort of machine. Nobody knows what it is, but it's all about that. Alright, so the last category we have are the best books of the year. And first up, we have Contact by Carl Sagan. This is a reread for me. I hadn't read it since high school, and Contact is actually what inspired me to go into astronomy. So I was in grad school for astronomy, and yeah, Contact just had a really big impact on me, and I'm happy to say that it was just as good the second time around, even reading it as an adult who has quit astronomy. If you don't know about Contact, it is by Carl Sagan, the famous astronomer. So it's an astronomer who wrote a novel, which is fascinating, but it's about an astronomer who discovers a message from an alien civilization, and this message contains instructions for how to build a machine. Nobody knows what the machine will do, but they end up building it, and it's all about that. The main themes of the book are religion versus science, which is really interesting, and I love all of the philosophical notes in this. And if you haven't seen it, Contact is actually also a movie. This is the movie cover. It has Matthew McConaughey and Jodie Foster, and it's a really good movie. I highly recommend watching that too. But yeah, Contact just will forever be a favorite of mine. It's great. And then next up, once again, we have Florida by Lauren Groff. It just had a big impact on me. I just, despite the fact that I am not a mother and I don't necessarily relate to the life of Lauren, I related to the way she experiences the world, and I loved all of just everything about this. It was great. And then next we have The Strange Bird by Jeff Vandermeer, which is that companion novella to Born. Something about this just really got to me. It was fascinating because it has little hints that refer to Born, so you get to learn more about the world of Born, but specifically about the character of the strange bird, and I just really loved it. It was so good. I'm enjoying the novellas this year. And then finally we have The Left Hand of Darkness by Ursula K. Le Guin, which this was my first ever Le Guin. I read 3 different Le Guins this year, and I'm so glad, and I'm definitely gonna continue reading her work. And I just loved this one so much. I love the winter writing. I love the notes on humanity that it mentions. It's also the alien race in this is it has a different kind of gender to human genders, so there are interesting themes about gender and about just everything. I love it. Loved it. Okay, and I'm gonna be honest, I haven't picked a winner for this category yet because it's too hard. Okay, after after a few seconds of deliberation, I think I'm gonna go with Contact. Which, like, can I count it if it's a reread? Sure, why not? It just hits. It hits the right spot. The fact that as a kid I really loved the science side of this, and now as an adult I love the religious and philosophical aspects of it. It's like it has followed me throughout my life, and without realizing it, it just continues to describe how I think about things, which is such a wonderful thing to get from a book. Which, I mean, I could say that about Florida by Lauren Ruff too, but it's a different kind of... like, I relate to this in its viewpoints and its philosophies, whereas I relate to Florida just more in, like, a mental headspace kind of a way. Yeah. I mean, there were a bunch of quotes at the end of this. Let's see. Okay, here's one. This new project of hers was in experimental theology, but so is all of science, she thought. At the station, she had learned a kind of humility, a reminder of how little the inhabitants of Earth really knew. There might, she thought, be as many categories of beings more advanced than humans as there are between us and the ants, or maybe even between us and the viruses. But it had not depressed her. Rather than a daunting resignation, it had aroused in her a swelling sense of wonder. There was so much more to aspire to now. And I just think that wraps up my whole feeling about astronomy, honestly. Yeah. So with that, those are my favorite books that I read in 2023. It was a lot, I know, but I'm happy to be here, and I can't wait to read more books. Yeah, so let me know what your favorite books you've read this year were, and I'll see you